Set out. Set out in misty pre-dawn darkness and took the first wrong turn that was possible. By the time the sun had smudged the night horizon, my way back was lost for good. Quickly found my awkwardly packed and hazy goals, a burden to be cast off. Now I cruised along, powered by the illusions scattered from out my youthful imagination. The sun was not too hot, and I set a pace that did not strain me. All along the way, kind strangers righted me and saw me off again. Nights always found me blotting out any accidental recollections. The countryside kept on changing slowly, and so did I, drifting on. Good women bade me stay with them to build enduring dreams. Old dogs roamed with me, taking scraps beside my fires. Aging men told me these riddles, and to this day they grow even harder. Watched the sunrise many times, did not really see what it lit. Heard voices speaking softly in tongues that were strange to me. The seasons changed along with the scenery as I passed by to somewhere else. It took me quite a while not to fear all those things I did not understand. Often woke up excited to explore another place I had never been before. Paused here and there for half a season where the living was warm and easy. Picking grapes and apples, harvesting wheat and berries, occupied me in their time. With no goal and nowhere to return to, I could not in honesty say that I was ever lost. My potential satisfaction increased with every hardship I endured. Deeply drifted snow blanketed me until late spring during several years. At last I began to notice that my growth rings began to narrow into simple habits. Even as my eyes grew dimmer, I used my experience to fill in the finer details. My opinions lay quietly inside, that they might not damage my chances on the road. Stayed with men who built warming fires in rusty barrels, burning old debris, slept in sturdy cardboard shelters, and recycled newspapers into blankets. Walked trails I could not see as darkness overtook me in ever-deepening woods. Sought safety in the churches, but they did not keep them very warm. There were many times there was no path ahead and no room to turn around. Then again, all directions seemed open with equal beauty and great promise. Sometimes I wept with loneliness, and at others with good cheer. Doors sometimes closed as I approached, but many showed me warmth and light. Pursued my own tack without a map, but many had been that way before. Laziness and greed were not parts of my own peculiar temptations. Found real beauty in the desert, but only in the dark of night. Winters did not bother me in the lands where skies stayed mostly clear. Happiness stopped overcoming me, and at last ceased to let me down so very hard. The disaffected no longer enchanted me, but still the ordinary held no magnetism. Slept in cast-off clothes with dirt in many layers between my toes. Paid too much for petty luxuries that could not just satisfy my imaginary needs. Kept on walking and taking odd jobs right along with the many other immigrants. Met a couple pilgrims and caught snatches of their inner conversations. Learned to know the weather by the marching of the clouds. Watched the tides changing with the waxing and the waning of the moon. The gypsies would not speak to me because I had nothing for them to steal. Wondered why the wild geese had decided to settle down. Did not have any snapshot history to prove that I was ever there. Got all the disgusting skin diseases, but free doctors saw me through. Helped build orphanages and new wells, dirt roads, and far-off one-room schools. Talked to myself just enough to know that I actually could still hear. Watched the prisoners flood the highways, desperately seeking weekend recreation. Heard the children laugh and call me names, and was tempted into wonder. Learned to read the water and followed the courses of rivers like good books. Was alone so long that I felt uncomfortable when I found myself in crowds. Grew skilled at untangling random knots, but could not bind things together properly. Found my contempt slowly turned into confusion when nothing could be changed. Studied the evolution of the litter that crept out in every direction on the trails. Felt my faculties decaying even as the world around me moved ever faster. Built a warm and quiet retreat deep inside my thickly walled and slowly moving head. Began to see my own footprints being made by other shoes, set out for nowhere, so I could never say that I was ever really lost. Stayed mostly where the rain was so welcome you would not look for shelter. Could not fathom how many people now clung everywhere to this earth. Saw the headlines in passing as if they emerged from my unconscious. Jumped into cold lakes to clean off the sweat and rinse out my mind. Rolled in the snow and shook like a dog and cackled into the emptiness. Carefully peed on the phony green lawns that I stole by in the night. Helped them hold me up as an example for their children to avoid. Listened carefully to the silvery tongues of their clever politicians. Compared the fantasies of those caught up in some religion or another. Watched as progress unfolded and put an end to many quiet places. Observed as dying cities spread and grew larger, even in their decay. Was poked and laughed at in a cage I built of my own dreams and fantasies. Got washed and fed by patient women who had seen it all before. Did not make a fortune and was abandoned by the merchants. Grew thin and wiry on scraps during long marches, but did not complain. Set out with bright eyes and happy smile, and only slowly grew gnarled and twisted. Found myself at last with a good set of well-tempered memories. Never stayed long enough anywhere to really leave it all behind. Never got all bent up about running out of time for the happily ever after. Read much more than I talked and wrote way more often than I shopped. Croaked and peeped out my little song on this one tiny green pond, filled up with tears at the beauty of the frightfully empty universe. Spit a bit of ochre around my hand as it lay upon the canyon wall. Never had enough to toss it all aside and make some kind of a new start. Listened equally to the recovering alkies as to the suave opinion makers. Trudged on through one more war or man-made disaster after another. Wrung my hands in anguish through the wailing for the dead and the dying. Carried off the victims and looked for patterns in the smoke of their pyres. Knew I had no ultimate goal, but never doubted my sense of direction. Felt secure on lonely beaches where the waves crashed in endless trains. Abided in the valleys, not yet buzzing with man's abrasive touch. Happened upon a woman who spread peace, tending plants and flowers. Wondered at the men who sought security by constantly preparing for another war. Saw them savor artificial victories and taste the bitterness of imaginary defeats. Set out with confused expectations and collected unrelated realizations. Grew older but was not deemed wiser and let it go at that. Considered my words so carefully that they mostly condensed into silence. Stepped aside as others rushed by me, heading off in different directions. Kept on walking, trying still to see it all for myself. Used up more than I helped build, reaped so much more than I had sown. Slowly regressed back through the infantile once again towards the void. Reached out back through time to those that I had once known. Looked forward in the night to the peace of pre-dawn hours. Set out again as someone different, but set out just the same. Did not lack for sustenance, comfort, or human understanding. Loved the good earth that sustained me, and wondered at its mysteries. Saw the moon through daylight clouds, as if from somewhere else and far away. At last started simply observing as the growing mystery moved on in around me.